How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Daled, Daf 44, Masechta Yevamos. Friends, I'm over here in Yerushalayim. We have family over here, so we'll see who's gonna have the unfortunate chance to stumble in here while I'm recording, and we'll pull them in and embarrass them. Come in at your own risk. That's what I say. Friends, we got a Daf of Gemara to learn. Daf Mem Daled of Masechta Yevamos. Friends, well, Daf Mem Daled, the first part we talk a little bit about Yibum. I guess like every other day. And then the second part we talk about the Machzir Grushaso and stuff like that. Interesting sugya, right? Meaning somebody who gets married to somebody he's not supposed to, either because they got divorced and then she married somebody in between and then they got remarried even though they shouldn't. Get into cholos. I have a friend who thought he was a cholol, of course. Whenever I think about a cholol, I think of that friend who thought he always thought he was a cholol. It turns out that he wasn't right, seemingly. Well, I guess it depends who you ask. Here we go. That's what I was saying. I was just saying, I'm wondering who's going to have the unfortunate chance to stumble while I'm recording and will embarrass them. But, alright, let's see. Alright, they're doing laundry down here.
Do you need laundry done?
No, I did laundry this morning. Yeah, because I had a feeling that you would want to do laundry today, so I did it this morning. But while everybody was asleep, I was doing laundry. But then again, while I was asleep, everybody was working. Anyways, let's go weiter. Alright, so we're going to start on Daf Mem Gimel Amud Beis, about 5 lines from the bottom at the Mishnah. Arba Achin Nesuin, Arba Noshim. Oh, Ma, you get a sneak peek of what lays ahead of you. Yeah. Arba Achin Nesuin, Arba Noshim. So, you have 4 brothers, they're married to 4 women. Alright, that's nice. And, in our family we have 4 brothers, but only 3 of them are married to women. And one of them, I'll leave that to you to figure out what's with the other one. So you have 4 brothers, and they're married to 4 sisters. So Reuven, Shimon, no, not 4 sisters, but 4 women, right? So you have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. They're all brothers, married to Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, but they're not related. Okay, so now Vamesu. Now all 4 brothers die. So now, if the oldest brother wants to do Yibum with all of the widows, he's allowed to. So obviously you're thinking, wait, I thought all the brothers died. How's he doing Yibum? Okay, the Gemara is going to ask that kasha. But I guess the point is, if there was Yisachar and Zvulun, so Yisachar would do Yibum with all of the wives. Okay. Fine. So if he wants to do Yibum with all the wives, he can. No. So as we know, if Reuven is married to 2 women, Sarah and Rivka, Reuven dies. So Shimon, if he does Yibum or Chalitza with one of them, so the other one is Pater, right? You only do Yibum or Chalitza once. Okay? So let's say Reuven was married to Sarah and to Rivka. Now the thing is, Rivka was already married before and she was divorced from her first husband, which means that she already can't marry a Kohen. Now a Chalutza can't marry a Kohen either, right? So therefore, Reuven's married to Sarah and to Rivka, and then he dies. Now Shimon needs to do Yibum. So the thing is, Yibum or Chalitza. So if he's going to do Chalitza, so now he has a choice. He can do Chalitza with either Sarah or to Rivka, right? So we're saying that if Rivka already was married to somebody else before Reuven, and they got divorced, so she already can't marry a Kohen because she's a Grusha, she's a divorcee. Now, if Shimon does Chalitza with Sarah, so now in addition to Rivka, who already can't marry a Kohen, now Sarah also can't marry a Kohen because she did Chalitza. So we say, better, why don't you just do Chalitza with Rivka? She already can't marry a Kohen anyways, so do Chalitza, and at least Sarah, if she wants, she can marry a Kohen. So, fine. So let's read that again. If one of the wives is allowed to marry a Kohen, the other one already is not because she was already married and divorced. So if he's going to do Chalitza with the widow who already can't marry a Kohen. And if he's going to do Yibum, so I assume what it means is he can do Yibum with the one who can marry a Kohen. I assume the point is that it doesn't matter at that point. You can do Yibum with, meaning even with the Kshera. I assume that's the point. Says the Gemara, the Gemara asks, I don't understand. If you have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, they all die. So what do you mean that the oldest brother is going to do Yibum? There is no other brothers. They're all dead. So says the Gemara, no, 4 of the brothers. So maybe you have Epis, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun as well. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda all die. So now, so if Yisachar is older, so then Yisachar can do Yibum with Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. Alright. Let's go weiter. Harishus biyado. So we say that, so Yisachar would be able to do Yibum with Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. Vishavkele. Well, let him do that. I mean, can he even afford that? I mean, he's responsible to take care of, all 4 of these women and these children, and the pasuk says in the context of chalitza that the elders call the fellow hein v'lo shluchon, them and not the representatives. V'dibu elav, they speak to him. V'lamad shemasiyin lo eitza ogenes lo, that they try to give him good advice. Shemayu hu yeled, that if he's a youngster, he's a kena and she's already experienced, she's already an older aged woman. Huzakin, if he's an aged fellow, v'hiyalda, and she's just a girl. Omrin lo, so they say to him, malach etzel yaldo, malach etzel zakena. They say to him, look, if there's like a significant age gap, they say, look, why are you marrying such a young girl, or why are you marrying such an aged woman? Why don't you marry somebody your own size? Marry somebody your own age. Don't create a sort of potentially frictiony situation in your house. No. So what's the point? So the point is that apparently we try to give him good advice, right? And therefore, mistama, the good advice would be like, why get yourself into such a demanding situation? Like, maybe it's better to just do chalitza. So, and for the Gemara, well, he's a wealthy fellow, and the financial implications of having so many more people in his household would not necessarily be would not create a difficulty. If that's the case, afilu tuva. So why only 4? Maybe 400, 4 million. So afilu tuva nami, say it's a tova kamashman. So the Mishnah is giving good advice. Dalit in tefelo kiechitin tayon b'chodesh. 4 is kind of the max. If there are 4 sisters, you could do even with all the 4, but then don't no more than that, because so that everybody can have ona at least once a month, right? That if, right, the Rashi says that the ona, which is the amount, the quota that the Rashi says a Talmud Chacham, the quota that a Talmud Chacham needs to sleep with his wife is once a week, and if there are 4 wives, so each one gets, right, they can have relations once a month, and but more than that, more than 4 women, then they might not even be able to have that much, and that would we want everybody to be able to have their proper ona. So the Mishnah had said that if Reuven was married to Sarah and to Rivka, and then Reuven dies, Shimon does chalitza or yibum with Sarah, so that counts for Sarah and for Rivka. Rivka doesn't need to do anything. So now, why can't you do Yibum with both of them? Do Yibum with Sarah and Rivka. Okay, my brother and his wife are here. Maybe Ashley is going to accidentally come down here and we'll chop her. We'll be like, get over here. Get into the podcast. So why doesn't Shimon just do Yibum with both? So Amr B'chi Ba'ab, Amr B'yochanan, Amr Kra. Asher lo yivneh es beis achiv. You hear that, friends? That B'chi Ba'ab says that the pasuk says Asher lo yivneh es beis achiv. In the context of chalitza, it says, who is this fellow that will not build, that will not do Yibum with the beis achiv, with the house, the singular house of his brother? That Yibum is done only with one house, with one of the wives, not with a second one, just once. Can't you do chalitza with both of them? It says in the context of chalitza, the house, the singular house of the fellow who removed, or the removed shoe fellow. Lemaise, I'm not going to tell you about. All right, let's go weiter. Well, what do you want me to tell you? Let's go weiter. Fine, you don't do chalitza twice. How about this? Why don't you do yibum with Sarah and chalitza with Rivka? As we've seen a few times, the pasuk says in the context of chalitza, if he doesn't want to do yibum, implying that, but if he did want to do yibum, that would be an option. Somebody who's able to do yibum, so can do chalitza. But somebody who's unable to do yibum is unable to do chalitza, and therefore, if he does yibum with Sarah, so then when it comes to Rivka, he doesn't do yibum with Rivka, and therefore if he doesn't do yibum with Rivka, so Mamele doesn't do chalitza with Rivka either. Fine. I think I read that whole thing. I call all the yibum, all the chalitza, kol she'ein all the yibum, ein all the chalitza. Fine. Ve'od and more. So shelo yomu beis miktaso banui miktaso chalutz. So that right there. So people shouldn't say that, well, when you have this situation, you do yibum with one of them and chalitza with the other one, right? That part of it's yibum, part of it's chalitza. Who cares? Why? What's the problem with saying that you do, yibum with one and chalitza with the other? Like, are there any problems with that? Well, fine, yeah, there's no problem with first doing yibum and then doing chalitza, because, like, okay, the chalitza is just nothing. Meaning, you already did yibum. So, okay, so you do chalitza, it doesn't add, doesn't subtract. But if the opposite happens, then that could be a problem. If he first does chalitza with Sarah, if he then does yibum with Rivka, he's basically just sleeping with Eishes Ach, which is a problem, because there's no mitzvah of yibum anymore. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's not Eishes Ach, I'm sorry. Sorry, the violation would not be Eishes Ach, it would be the lav of lo yivne, right? Meaning, once already, right, if he does chalitza with the first, with Sarah, so then, right, the pasuk says, right, Kevin Shalabana Shuv Lo Yivne, it's a lav, right, that once already you decide, right, once already the decision is that you're not going to do yibum, and you do chalitza, that's it. The yibum is over, and therefore, once you do chalitza with Sarah, if you do yibum with Rivka, you'll be violating the lav of Kevin Shalabana Shuv Lo Yivne. So therefore, you wouldn't be able to do that, and therefore, since you would not be able to do chalitza and then yibum, we also say don't do yibum followed by chalitza, because you can get mixed up and end up doing a lav. In fact, the Gemara, well, maybe I'll say yibum only applies when there's one wife. Okay, if Reuven's married to Sarah, Reuven dies, so Shimon does yibum and chalitza with Sarah. But if Reuven's married to Sarah and to Rivka, so then yibum doesn't apply. Yibum only is a one-wife thing. Imkain, if that's the case, well, Sarah's erva das Rahman Alamali. Friends, are you thinking this? Are you thinking, well, why did we just, break our brains for the past 44 days trying to figure out, how does yibum apply to the tzarav and erva and all sorts of things? If there's more than one wife, yibum doesn't apply. I mean, it's not so crazy. I remember when I learned Masechta Nida, you spend the whole Masechta trying to figure out and counting days and Zava and Nida and all sorts of stuff. Comes Reb Zera at the end and says, look, we're just machmir anyways, that we always just wait 2 weeks, So, Geilu, it wouldn't be so crazy if we break our brains on that. But I guess it's a little different, because by Nida it's a chumrah, where over here we're literally saying that the mitzvah only would apply when there's one wife, which means why did we just waste our time for the past 44 dafs, which Be'etzim is 44 days, trying to figure out what happens if the erva, right? Reuven's married to Sarah has a co-wife Rivka, but Sarah is the daughter of Shimon, and then they die. If yibum only applies with one wife anyways, and with two wives it's not relevant, so then, why do we even break our brains? So then, Zimkein Sarah's erva das Rahman Alamali. So Hashta Beis Ba'amo Amart, if you're saying that just two regular wives, right? If Reuven's married to Sarah and to Rivka, who aren't any kind of erva, we're saying that yibum chalitza doesn't apply. Sarah's erva baya. And then does it even Is it even a question with regard to the tzara of an erva? Obviously not. If by two regular wives who are not ervas or anything, yibum doesn't apply because there's two of them. So then certainly when it's a tzara of an erva, yibum wouldn't apply. So actually, alam alo, it's trich. Why not? Sakadati chamira meifta to say erva avroi kaimo. It is yabum tzara also. Kamashman da asira. Look, you could say that no. Actually, I might think that because one of them is an erva, then she actually, it's kilu, she doesn't count in the context of yibum. Maybe I would say that the tzara of the erva counts as just a single wife, in which case I might think that yibum would apply, and therefore the whole point is that we have to teach that yibum doesn't apply in that case. So maybe I could say that yibum only applies in a case of one wife and not by two. And the reason why it applies by erva is because I might, the reason why we had to have this whole thing about erva is because I may have thought to say that, yibum doesn't apply by one, and therefore that should be the same, right? And therefore when you have one wife who's an erva and the other one isn't, it's like the one who's an erva doesn't account, and maybe yibum would apply there, and so then kamash malan, therefore we have to teach that it doesn't apply there. So why don't we say that maybe yibum only applies when there's one wife, but elivim to yibum to ribo. It's ribo. It says in the pasuk by chalitza yibum, it says yibum multiple times, which therefore is coming to say that no, yibum even applies when there are multiple wives, and therefore yibum applies even when there are multiple wives. All right, what do you want me to tell you? The Mishnah had said hoisa achas kshera. If Sarah was able to get married to a kohen, but Rivka was already a divorcee from before, so she can't marry a kohen anyway. So we say that if you're going to do chalitza, better to do chalitza with Rivka, since she already can't marry a kohen. Whereas if he does chalitza with Sarah, now she won't be able to marry a kohen because she's a chalutza. May as well do it with Rivka, who already can't marry a kohen. Amr Yosef Kanshona Rebbe. Here Rebbe taught lo yishpoch adam meibor v'achem tzrichim loim. If you have Ruvain doesn't need well water. Right? Well water, of course, reminds us of well wood. So, but anyways, Ruvain doesn't need well water. He's got plenty of well water, I guess. So he doesn't need any well water, but he shouldn't spill it on the floor because maybe Shimon needs it, right? Don't be wasteful. And therefore, here also, Ki'ilu, don't do chalitza with, Sarah, if you can do chalitza with Rivka, and it doesn't have any harm to anybody, right? So therefore, when there are implications for, right? Don't do something that would have negative implications for somebody else, right? Don't throw your well water on the floor when Shimon can use it. Here also, don't do chalitza with Sarah if you could do chalitza with Rivka, who already can't marry a kohen, and it doesn't have negative implications for Sarah. All right, and now we get to a new Mishnah, Marze Grushaso. Who could tell me what that is? That's talking about Reuven's married to Sarah, and they get divorced. Now, if they want, they can get remarried. However, what happens though is that Sarah now gets married to Shimon, and then she gets divorced from Shimon. Right? Reuven and Shimon are not brothers, right? Stam. Then she gets divorced from Shimon, or Shimon dies, whatever it is, and now she gets remarried to Reuven, which she's not allowed to do. Right? Because once she marries somebody else, she cannot be remarried to Reuven. But she does that anyways. Vanose chalutzaso. Right? Or, right, if Reuven's married to Sarah, and Reuven's brother, Shimon, does chalitza with Sarah, and then he decides, I want to marry her, can't do that either. Both of those cases, those are lavs, right? Right? By Machzor Gushoso, it says something like, Lo yuchal baila arishon lachzo lekachta, or something like that. Right, so that's a lav, and also by chalitza, right? We said kevin shalobana shuv lo yivne. Vanose krovas chalutza, so somebody who marries the relative of somebody he did chalitza with, right? So if Shimon and Sarah did chalitza, so he's not allowed to marry Sarah's sister, and if he does, in any of these cases, yotzi va'avolad mamzer divrei Reb Akiva. Reb Akiva says in any of those three cases, they cannot remain married, and any children that they have together would be considered a mamzer. The Chacham say in avolod mamzer. Chacham say no, the child is not a mamzer, alright, because it's only a lav. It's not like an isser, a karis or anything like that. It's just a lav. So the child is not a mamzer. Where am I? But they do admit that when it comes to the relative of a divorcee, that the volod is a mamzer, right? So if Reuven and Sarah get divorced, so Reuven's not allowed to marry Sarah's sister, Rivka, right? As we know, until as long as Sarah is alive, Reuven cannot marry Sarah's sister Rivka, and if he does, it's an erva, it's a chiyuv kares, and therefore, in that case, the Chachamim say that the child will be a mamzer. So now, affecting Gemara v'savar Akiva anose krovas chalutzaso avolod mamzer. 1 second. Does Rabbi Akiva really hold, right? Because we said, according to Rabbi Akiva, that by machzir grushaso nose chalutzaso and nose krovas chalutzaso, Rabbi Akiva says that the volod is a mamzer. Does Rabbi Akiva really say that if Shimon does chalitza with Sarah and then he marries Sarah's sister, that the child is a mamzer? But didn't Rish Lakish say Kanshana Rebbe that here Rebbe taught Achos Grusha Midivei Teire, that marrying the sister of your divorced wife, right? So if Reuven was married to Sarah and they get divorced, and then Reuven marries Sarah's sister, so that is an Isser D'Oraisa. But Achos Chalutza Midivei Sofim. But marrying the sister, right? If Reuven dies, then Shimon does chalitza with Sarah, and then Shimon marries Sarah's sister, that's midrabanan. How could Rabbi Akiva say that you're chayiv kares for violating an issur d'Rabbanan? Right? You're not going to be chayiv kares for that. You'd have to be d'oraisa. So tni krovas grushaso. So the Gemara says, okay, so say that what Rabbi Akiva is saying is that somebody who marries the relative of his divorced ex-wife, right? So meaning if Reuven was married to Sarah and they get divorced, and then Reuven marries Sarah's sister, so in that case there would be a chiyuv kares. Okay, fine. This also makes sense to say that Rabbi Akiva is talking about the relative of his divorced wife. Well, ex-wife, what? Divorcee, divorced ex-wife, yeah, ex-wife, yeah, that sounds nice. Because I imagine if she died, then she wouldn't be an ex-wife, right? I assume not. So probably ex kind of, right. I don't think you refer to your wife who passed away as your ex-wife. No, probably not. So yeah. So let's just assume here at Babylon Talmud that ex-wife refers to somebody you divorced. So not your divorced wife, your ex-wife. That sounds nice. So Tani Krovas Grushaso, fine. So Tini Krovas Grushaso Achinam Mistavra. This also makes sense that it's talking about your ex-wife Dekatani Seifa, because it says by the Chacham Modim Benose Krovas Grushaso that even though the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Akiva, they do admit by when Reuven marries the relative of his ex-wife, She'avolod Mamzer, that the volod would be a Mamzer. Yomit Bishlama Ayriba. So now it would make sense to say, if they were already talking about his ex-wife, meaning if Rabbi Akiva was talking about Machzir Grushaso, as well as he marries his Chalutzaso, and the third case being somebody who marries the relative of his ex-wife, and then we're saying that the Chachamim disagree with regard to remarrying your wife who got married to somebody else in the middle, and they also disagree with regard to marrying somebody you did chalitza with, because in both those cases it's only a lav. However, umodim, they do admit that when it comes to the relative of your ex-wife, that the child would be a mamzer, because that's the oraisa, right? The relative of your ex-wife. But if you say that Rabbi Akiva was not talking bichlal about marrying the relative of your ex-wife, rather he was talking about marrying the relative of somebody who you did chalitza with, so mayu modim. So what does it mean? But they admit to what? We're not talking about, it's not like we ever mentioned the ex-wife anywhere. This is new material. So v'dilma hakamash melon diyesh mamzer mechayv kresus. But maybe it's bringing up something new. Sure, maybe Rabbi Akiva is talking about the sister of the chalutza, and now the Chachamim are adding that, but when it comes to the sister of your ex-wife, then there's a chiyuv kares, and the child is a mamzer. We already learned that later on. Where? On Daf Mem Tes, in 5 days from now. Ezu mamzer. What's considered a mamzer? Kol she'er b'saru shu below yavo divrei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says any relative who is a lav, even if it's just a mitzvah lo saseh, there's no karis or anything, but that's enough, the child will be a mamzer. Shimon HaTimni omer kol shechayovin olav karis bidei shamayim. Whereas where Shimon HaTimni says anybody you chayiv karis for, v'alacha kidvarav, and the halacha is like Shimon HaTimni. So I don't need the chacham here to teach me that there's a chayve kresus by mamzer, because we already know that from Shimon HaTimni. V'duma kasosim lantana ki Shimon HaTimni. Maybe the point is that we want to say that, well, this is the opinion of the chachamim, and therefore the halacha, this is how we know that the halacha is like Shimon HaTimni. So imkein lisnei shar chayve kresus krovas gushos ulamali. But then why specify specifically the relative of your ex-wife? What's special about that? It could list any of the other ones also. So Elish Mamina Ayriba. No. So rather, why are we randomly talking about the relative of your ex-wife? Because it's not random, because the ratio is already talking about that, right? That's what Rabbi Akiva is talking about. Rabbi Akiva is talking about Machzer Grushoso, Hanose Chalutzoso, and also somebody who marries the relative of their of his ex-wife. And the Chacham disagree with Rabbi Akiva, but they do admit when it comes to the relative of your ex-wife, there they would say that, right, that the child would be a mamzer. V'dumu la'olam lo ayriba. But then the Gemara says, no, one second, no. Maybe the Mishnah is like we said. The Mishnah is talking about that the Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva is talking about the relative of a chalutza, like we said. And since Rabbi Akiva had mentioned Marzeh Grushoso and Nosei Chalutzaso, and also the relative of the Chalutza, so Taninami, so therefore the Chacham also brought up the concept of Krovas Grushoso, the relative of your ex-wife. So therefore you could say that Rabbi Akiva is talking about the relative of a Chalutza. And now the rabbis are now saying, oh, once we already mentioned that, let's also talk about the relatives of your ex-wife. So, Elekrovas Chalutza, so the Rabbi Akiva Abi Mamzer. Okay, so if that's the case, then basically, no. So if that's the case, the Rabbi Akiva is listing 3 examples. The first one being Marzeh Grushoso, somebody who was married, they got divorced, she married somebody else, they're no longer married, she gets remarried to the first person, which she's not allowed to do, or he marries somebody who they already did Chalitza, or the relative of a Chalutza. And we're saying that in any of those cases, Rabbi Akiva is saying that they cannot stay married and any children would be a mamzer. So Rabbi Akiva is therefore saying that the relative of a chalutza is somebody that would be chayiv kares, and the child would be a mamzer. So I'm sorry. That according to Rabbi Akiva, it doesn't have to be a chayiv kares, but that it would at least be a lav, it would at least be asmi d'oraisa, and that the child is a mamzer. So Amr Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amr Rabbi Yochanan Hanu Talmid Rabbi Akiva. This is the reason for Rabbi Akiva the Amar Kro, because the pasuk says Beis Chalutz Anal Hakosuv Kro Beiso. That it says in the context of Chalitza, says Beis Chalutz Anal, that the pasuk calls it his house, i.e. that we treat the Chalutza, that we treat the Chalutza like Beiso, like his wife, and therefore if we treat it like his wife, so then the relatives would also be asmi d'oraisa, and therefore if it's asmi d'oraisa, even if it's just a lav, Rabbi Akiva would say that the child would be a mamzer. Okay, fine, but the Chacham disagree in all of those cases and would say that there's no child when there's no mamzer when it is just a lav. Now says the Gemara, Amr Reb Yosef, Amr Reb Shimon B'Rebbe. Oh, says Reb Yosef, Amr Reb Shimon B'Rebbe, that says Reb Shimon the son of Rebbe. So, one second. Amr Reb Yosef, Amr Reb Shimon Rebbe. Yeah, I guess so. Well, Reb Shimon Rebbe, I guess, was probably what? Like an Amora, I guess. Rebbe was like the last Tana, I guess. Maybe he's an Amora. It's probably like Reb Chia. Reb Chia, I think, was like a Tana and an Amora. Anyways, I call modem b'marzeh grushoso she'avolad pogum l'chuna. Oh. So everyone agrees that when it comes to marzeh grushoso, that the child is pogum l'chuna, the child can't marry a Kohen. Right? So we have a situation where Ruvain was married to Sarah, they got divorced. Sarah then got married to some guy named Shimon, and whatever it is, she's no longer married to him. He died, they got divorced, whatever it is, and then she goes back and marries Ruvain again, remarries Ruvain. She's not allowed to do that. you can only get remarried to the, right? If Reuven gets divorced, if Reuven and Sarah get divorced, they can only get remarried as long as Sarah hasn't married anybody else in the interim. Once she gets married to Shimon, she can't remarry Reuven. But they do it anyways. So everyone agrees that in that case, if they have a child together, the child is going to be a chalal. The child will not be able to marry a kohen. Manakal modim. What does it mean? Everyone agrees. Shimon Atimni. It's meaning Shimon Atimni dafagav the Omer Shimon Atimni. Even though Shimon Atimni said a few minutes ago, ein mamzer mechayve lavin, that when it comes to chayve lavin, right, meaning arayas are an isser koris, but mamzer grushaso it's a lav, right? Meaning you don't do it, right? Don't remarry your wife who got married to somebody else in the interim. But if you do, it's a lav. It's not a chiyuv koris. So now we're saying the mamzer lo have. So even though Shimon Atimni would say that the child is not a mamzer, but pogum yahave, it's pogum, right? The child cannot marry a kohen. If it's a daughter, the daughter cannot marry a kohen. So mikav chomer me'almona, and we can bring this as a kav chomer from a widow. Uma'almona lekohen gadol she'nisur shave bakol. When it comes to a widow who marries a kohen gadol, now a widow can marry a kohen, but a widow cannot marry a kohen gadol if they get married nonetheless. So we said, now that is a very ma'almona lekohen gadol she'nisur shave bakol. Now that obviously doesn't apply to everybody; it only applies in a specific case. A widow to a kohen gadol. Not everybody's a kohen gadol. There's only one of those. And nonetheless, bina pogum, and the child that they have together is pogum, is not allowed to marry, right? If they have a daughter, that daughter cannot marry a kohen. Zoshi sur shave bakol. So when it comes to machzor grushaso, this is something that applies to everybody. This applies to every single yid. You can't get divorced and then get remarried once your wife has been married to somebody else. So enu din sheb in a pogum. So then certainly in that case where it applies to everybody, the child will be pogum, will be unable to marry a kohen. Fine. So we want to say up until now that in the case of machzor grushaso, the child is pogum, the child is not allowed to marry a kohen. But now the Gemara starts changing its tune and starts to maybe argue that this child can marry a kohen. Because after all, we can ask a kasha on that kav chomer. Mala almona shekeni atzma mischaleles. Almona is almona l'kohen gadol is a particularly stringent case, because in that case, not only is the child unfit to marry a kohen, but even she can't marry a kohen, right? She and the kohen gadol are not allowed to remain together. And I guess even if he dies or something, she would be unfit to marry a kohen, because she herself becomes a chalala. So that's particularly stringent, right? As opposed to, machzor grushaso. I mean, she already can't marry, right? It's not right. She's already not allowed to marry a kohen because she got divorced, from Reuven already. But it's not the machzor grushasos that's making her unable to marry a kohen. I mean, she's already a divorcee. So we see that when it comes to a widow to a kohen gadol, specifically by marrying the kohen gadol, now she becomes a chalala herself, which is not the case by machzor grushaso. Right? At least it's not the machzor grushaso piece that's making her a chalala. And therefore, a widow to a kohen gadol is a more stringent case, and we can't learn from it. Ve'od, and more so, he to'eva ksiv. It says in the context of machzor grushaso that she is a to'eva. She is an abomination. Ve'ein banei to'evim, but not her children. Right? It says to'eva he. That whatever applies to her, not to her children. So this would be an argument to say that her children are not chalos. That if they have a daughter, she can marry a kohen. Ve'od, and more so, Tani, we have a brayso that says a machzor grushaso, that a fellow who remarries his divorced wife who he's not allowed to marry to, his ex-wife who he's not allowed to marry. V'anose chalutzaso, somebody who marries a woman who he did chalitza with. V'anose krovas chalutzaso, somebody who marries a relative of a chalutza. Rabbi Kiva Omer ein lo ba kiddushin. Rabbi Kiva says that there's no kiddushin here; they're not considered married. Ve'en etzricha imenu get. And she doesn't need to get a bill of divorce to be separated. I mean, there's no marriage here. Vi psula uvlada pasul. She's psula. Her child is pasul. V'chofenosu lahotzi, and we force them to separate. V'chacham omer, as the chacham say, yesh lo ba kiddushin, that no, it's just in all these cases it's a lav, and while you're not allowed to do it, kiddushin would be tofes. Utzricha imenu get, and they need to get a separated with a get. V'ik sheru vlada kosher, and she is kosher, and the child is kosher. What does that mean? Liman, what does it mean that she is kosher and the child is kosher? Lav l'chuna? Doesn't it mean that the child would be able to marry a kohen? Isn't that what it means that when we say that the child is kosher? Lo l'kahal. No, it means that the child could marry. Right? It's not like a mamzer where you can't marry anybody else, right? You can only marry another mamzer. No, we're saying that in this case, the child would be able to marry into the nation, anybody, who she wants, but not a kohen. Okay, fine. So now already we start kind of pushing back, right? Meaning we wanted to use as meaning what? No. So what happened up until now? We had said right? We had started off this new part of the Gemara saying that by Machzer Grushaso, the child is pogum, is not allowed to marry a kohen. And we brought a proof from the Aman of the Kohen Gadol, where the child is where the child is pogum, and then we started pushing back and say, but we can't learn out from Aman of the Kohen Gadol, and also by Machzer Grushaso, which says she is a toiv and not the child. Now we brought this brisa to say that by Machzer Grushaso she's kosher and the child is kosher. We want to say kosher l'chuna. So we started kind of turning it around and saying, no, actually, by Machzer Grushaso, the child should not be a chalal, should be able to marry a kohen. But now we're starting to push back in the opposite direction and saying, no, the child cannot marry a kohen. The child is allowed to marry any other Jew, not like a mamzer who can't marry any other Jew, can only marry another mamzer. But in this case, the child can marry any other Jew, but not a kohen. And now we start pushing back and saying that no, the child is a chalal and cannot marry a kohen. Okay, fine. Fine. But if that's the case, hiksher leman. But then when we say that, right? So we say that she's kosher and the child is kosher. So who is she kosher to? Ilem l'kol. If you're going to say that she can marry any other Jew, pshita, obviously she can marry any other Jew. Shum dezanya afsa l'kol. What? Just because she was married to Reuven, she then married Shimon, and then married Reuven again. Just because she married Reuven again, she's not allowed to marry anybody else anymore. So certainly, right? So meaning if we're saying that the child is allowed to marry any other Jew, but not a kohen, so that would mean that when we say that the mother is also kosher, it means to marry any other Jew. But isn't that obvious that she can marry any other Jew? El lav l'chehuna. So rather, it must be saying that no, she's kosher even to marry a kohen. Umidehi l'chehuna v'ladonami l'chehuna. And if we're saying that she's allowed to marry a kohen, so then also the child is allowed to marry a kohen. So then we're saying that the child is not a chalala. So midi irya hakadisa v'akadisa, and now the Gemara says no, not true. Treat them separately. She is allowed to even marry a kohen. The child is allowed to marry any other Jew, but not a kohen. Hachinam mistavra, and now this also makes sense. The katani reisha, that the first part of the brisa, when explaining Rabbi Akiva's opinion, it says psula uvlada pasul. Right? Rabbi Akiva says in all these cases, you're not allowed to get married and the marriage doesn't count, and she is pasul and the child is pasul. He psula laman, and who is she psula to? Ilem l'kol mishum dizanya afsula la l'kol. Right? If we're saying that she's pasul to marry any other Jew, what? Just because she remarried Reuven when she wasn't allowed to, she's not allowed to marry any other Jew? El lav l'chehuna. It must mean that so rather it's saying that she's not allowed to marry a kohen. Uvlada pasul, but when we say that the child, in that case, according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that the child is a mamzer, right? So laman. So who are we saying that the child is not allowed to marry? If we're just saying that the child is not allowed to marry a kohen, halakal kosher. But what? The child is allowed to marry anybody else? So Amar Rabbi Akiva avlad mamzer. Rabbi Akiva says that the child is a mamzer. You can't marry anybody else. Elipshita l'kol. No, clearly it must be that the child is not allowed to marry just any other Jew because the child is a mamzer. Umidireisha akadisa v'akadisa, seifa nami akadisa v'akadisa. And now, since we're saying that the first part, i.e. Rabbi Akiva, must be saying that the mother is pasul from marrying a kohen, and we're saying that the child is pasul not only from marrying a kohen, but even marrying kahal. So we see that we treat, pasul for her is different than pasul for the child, right? Pasul for the mother is different than pasul to the child. So then also in the second part, according to Chachamim, when we say that she is kosher, that means that she is kosher, well, not to marry a Kohen. She wouldn't be able to marry a Kohen in this case because she's already a divorcee, but like she would be kosher to like eat truma if she went back to her father's house. Sorry if I said she can marry a Kohen. She can't because she's a machzor grusha, so she's already divorced. But she's kosher, the kahuna kiddush. She'd be able to eat truma and things like that if she if she didn't have any children, she went back to her father's house. But the child would not be kosher, right? If they had a child, the child would not be kosher to marry a Kohen because the child would be a halala, would be pagum, but would be able to marry any other Jew. So what do we see? So we see that actually the child is pagum. The child is not allowed to marry a Kohen. So friends, what was kind of the up and down of this Amud so far? The point is, we started off by saying that when it comes to machzor grusha, so the child is pagum, and we brought a proof from Almana marrying a Kohen Gadol. And then we started to push back and say you can't learn out from Almana to Kohen Gadol. And also it says he toeva, but the child is not a toeva. And then we brought a brisa to say the child is kosher. Then we started pushing back in the other direction, saying no, when it says kosher, it means kosher to marry any other person, but she cannot marry a Kohen because she's pagum. And now we're going to explain. And then what do you do about when the pasuk says he toeva, when it says by machzor grusha, so it says she is a toeva, which we said was to the exclusion of the child, implying that the child is not pagum. No, he toeva ve'ein tzarasa toeva, aval bonei toevin. No, means that she is a toeva, and so is her children, right? Meaning by machzor grusha, so also the child is pagum. So when it says he toeva, it's to the exclusion of what? To the exclusion of her co-wife. Right? If let's say Ruvain had this, right, Sarah who was machzor grusha, but also Rivka, and then Ruvain dies and Shimon needs to do yibum, so you wouldn't do it with Sarah necessarily, but you would do it with Rivka, right? You would do yibum with Rivka. So that's what we're saying, that she is a toeva to exclusion of her co-wife, but the child is also a toeva. The child is also pagum. And then finally, Almana kasha. But then finally we said, yeah, but what about the fact that you can't learn out from an almana, right? We said that almana, her child is pagum. We say, yeah, but almana is more stringent because she herself is pagum. So you have to explain Rav Yosef like this, right? Meaning Rav Yosef initially quoted Rav Shimon bar Rebbe as saying, everyone agrees that by machzor grusha that the child is pagum. And we brought the proof from the Almana l'Kohen Gadol. No, rather it's not talking about machzor grusha. So rather, Rav Yosef says, Rav Yosef, Rav Shimon bar Rebbe, Hakomodim, everybody agrees, Beba al chayve kresus, that if somebody sleeps with the chayve kresus, somebody chayv karish avlad pogum, that the child will be pogum and cannot marry a kohen. Mana komodim, what does it mean? Who's everybody agrees? Rabbi Yoshua. It's Rabbi Yoshua, the Afagav, the Rabbi Yoshua, ein mamzer mechayv kresus. Even though Rabbi Yoshua says that if you have a relation, right, if a man and a woman have a baby together, and they're not allowed to be together, it's a chiyuv kares. Nonetheless, Rabbi Yoshua says the child is not a mamzer, but nihi de mamzer lohave pogum miyahave. Rabbi Yoshua would say that even though the child is not a mamzer, the child would be pogum. The child cannot marry a kohen. Mikal v'chomer me'almona, from a kavachomer from the almone. That a widow marrying a Kohen Gadol, which doesn't apply to everybody, it only applies to Kohen Gadol. Bina pagum, and yet the child is pagum. Zosha asura, sheisur shave bakol. These instances of arayas where it applies to everybody, enudin shebina pagum. Certainly, the child will be pagum. And if you're going to say, yeah, but you can't learn out from Almana because Almana is more stringent because she herself becomes a chalala. So achanami came in Shabala. To which the Gemara says, but in this case as well, right, by these arayas, she also becomes a halala because since she had this inappropriate relationship, she is treated like a zona and she's a halala, she cannot marry a kohen. Well, friends, that was Daf Mem Daled, Masechta Yevamos. So we started off Daf Mem Daled talking about kind of like Yibum kind of stuff, really, right? We were saying how, when you have two wives, so right when there's co-wives, right, if you do yibum or chalitza with one of them, then it covers the other one. And then we got to a new Mishnah where we talked about the machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim. The Rabbi Akiva says that even by chayve lavin, right? Even if marrying a particular person would only be a negative commandment, but not a chiyuv kares. Rabbi Kiva says that the child would be a mamzer, whereas the Chacham say no, the child would not be a mamzer. And then we got into a discussion about would the child from Machzer Grushoso be pogum or not. First we said yes, then we said maybe no, then we said yes. So very interesting. Friends, that was Daf Mem Daled, Daf 44, Masechta Yevamos. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.